Oh, before you skip ahead of my well-thought-out intro, let me dollop you with a bit of gratitude for choosing to hang with this podcast, and by extension, your boy, B.O. Thank you. I'd never take it for granted. ACNFers, this podcast shares a promotional sponsorship with the 2026 Power of Narrative Conference taking place March 27th and March 28th in lovely Boston, Massachusetts. This year's keynote speakers include Ken Burns, Patrick Radden Keefe, Angela Patton and Natalie Ray, Sarah Stillman and Asma Khalid. Oh my God. There's a handful of CNF pod alums on the total roster, and Patrick Radden Keefe's been on the podcast before. Episode 2-something, I don't know, go find it. If you use the promo code narrative20 at checkout, you get 20% off your fee. That's some serious cheddar. Visit combeyond.bu.edu to register. Repairing, restoring, reconnecting through storytelling. And no, I don't get commissions or kickbacks, so I'm not in it for the money, man. And if you don't like me and you don't want me getting kickbacks, just know that's not even happening. It's not a thing. So go do it. Go do it.
I can connect you, but you better have pitches. If you don't come with the idea, you're just a problem.
So Seth Wickersham put me in touch with a colleague of his, someone he went to grad school with, by the name of Tony Rehagen. Now, he's a special kind of freelancer in that he's a grinder. Much like Pete Croatto or Jen A. Miller, though Jen would probably bristle at being called a grinder, and other freelancer types who are balancing all kinds of work, content work, copywriting, alumni magazine work, and pure journalism. Tony's been in the thick of the freelance morass for a long, long time. He was featured in the 2015 anthology Next Wave for his piece called The Last Trawlers, a work of narrative journalism that really reads like a short story. It's amazing. His work has appeared in myriad places like Indianapolis Monthly, Atlanta Magazine, Men's Journal, and Bloomberg. More on what you'll learn in a moment. As you know, show notes to this episode and more can be found at brendanamara.com. Hey. You may elect to subscribe to the wildly popular Substack Pitch Club, where I invite primarily writers to share a winning pitch or query and have them audio annotate their reasoning throughout. So you read a little, you listen a little, and you learn a lot. Welcome to pitchclub.substack.com. I might footnote out the audio segments. In case you can't listen, you can read the text. I don't know. I aim to serve, even if it kills me. Oh, we got 3 new patrons over at patreon.com/CNFpod1. Give them a shout out. Big thanks to Lindsay Street, Shauna Kenny, and Wyatt Massey. Thanks so much for the extra bit of support. It's amazing. Tony was a blast. There are too many great nuggets from this conversation to list out, but I'll list a few nevertheless. We talk about his filing system for stories, how many stories he's working on at a time, being on the clock and off the clock all the time, treating his stories as a service or a trade like plumbing or carpentry, treating editors more like clients, taking risks and how much skin he puts into a certain story and where his ambitions lie now. And that just scratches the surface. You're going to get an actual parting shot this week on progress versus productivity. But for now, it's high time we cue up the montage and get on with it. Riff.
But when that's on my plate, then it's the fear of the deadline.
I work backwards from deadlines.
It's not fucking personal, but it feels so personal.
I am effing done.
This is going to have to interest somebody somewhere other than me.
When Seth put us in touch, he was like, oh, you really need to talk to Tony because he's someone who has been able to really sustain a freelance journalism career. At what point did you really, lean into the freelancing element of it? And then we'll get into, how you, the nuts and bolts of how you sustain it.
Sure. Well, basically, you said lean into. I was kind of pushed into. It's one of those things, I worked at Indianapolis Monthly as an editor. And then, as the stories kind of got out there, an editor at Men's Health just reached out. Was like, hey, would you like to freelance some on the side? I'm like, oh, that's cool. And of course, at the time, National Magazine, like $2 a word, that whole thing. So I'm like, yeah, of course I'll do that. And so that's when it kind of got on my radar that, hey, this is kind of a thing. And if I could string these things together, it could be a career. But that meaning it was 10 years before I actually made good on that. I moved down to Atlanta to do a similar role. Both magazines were owned by MS Communications at the time. So it was a kind of a transfer. But Atlanta was obviously kind of a bigger name magazine, a bigger market, had, like Luke Dittrich, Justin Heckert, other great writers that had been there. And so I was just still locked into the city regional magazine world, still freelancing a little bit along the way. And then, kind of right in the middle of this, I guess it would have been like 2014, 2015, the journalism world was kind of changing. I had my wheelhouse has always been kind of quirkier, longer magazine features, just about like moonshiners or, meth addicts or, those kind of things, from crime to like music, just the general interest type of stuff. And my editor really wanted to pivot from doing so many of those smaller and like larger quirky features and get more into the website, more into like covering daily news and courts and like crime and things that just weren't in my wheelhouse. And so as time got on, it kind of became apparent that, staff positions are very rare and very valuable at any publication these days, but especially city regionals back in the day. And so it kind of got to the point where it was just like, hey, the staff position here is no longer fits me. And so I put some feelers out. I actually I got another job offer in another city. But I was just like, you know what? I'm at a point now where my wife's working and has benefits, has access to these kind of things. So Atlanta graciously offered me kind of a freelance contract, nothing that was going to be full-time, but something that could at least feed me for, the next 6 months to a year. And I was like, let's just try the freelance game. And that was 12 years ago. And I don't think, I think I'm kind of feral now. I don't think I could adjust to an office if I had to. And so that's how it began.
Yeah. Once you've been out there long enough and have done it long enough and done it well, it is very hard to, even though the grind of it is very real,
for sure,
it's very hard to get back into the strictures and structures of the day-to-day 9 to 5-ishness of it all.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. No, and it's a great thing, because I'm always saying I'm never working and I'm always working. Like if I have my laptop with me, I'm working. Actually, if I have my phone with me, I'm working. I've done edits sitting in like Tiger Stadium in Detroit, or as Comerica Field's what it's called. But like I was sitting there, waiting for a ball game to start out of a rain delay, and got edits, and I was just like, I'm on my phone doing edits, and my wife's like, seriously? I'm like, yes, I gotta get this out. But yeah, so it's one of those things. I think that's pretty much any job nowadays, but especially freelancing. Because the other cool thing is that I don't have to have one boss who knows where I am. I have a bunch of bosses who have no idea where I am. So, sometimes they ask when I can't do it, but it's hard to say no. And that's the other thing about freelance is if there's a problem that I have, it's saying no. Like if they need something, yes, I can do that. I'll find a way to do it. If I have to pull off the side of the road to a truck stop to do the interview or file something, yes, I will find a way to do it.
Right. Is there the sense that if you do say no, that suddenly like the work will dry up and you're like, oh my God, I'm closing a door on something?
Yeah, absolutely. That terror is ever present, and it has been for 12 years. And so like I always say, but when I got into it too, it's also kind of a philosophical thing. It's like, if you're going to do this, do it. You know what I mean? Like you may not, because at the time, and again, this is 12 years ago, but it still feels like I just started. And at the time you're just like, this is your opportunity. This is your freedom. Before you get locked down into another office situation, whether it's in journalism or not nowadays, this is your chance to be free. And also to like, when people come to you with things, which is amazing, like people actually come to me with things like, do this. I'm like, yes, okay, I'll do this and I'll try this, even if it's not in my comfort zone, just to see what happens. And I've never completely regretted it. There are times when I'm lost in like a 3,000 word draft about something I'm not interested in. I'm like, why did I say yes to this? But it always works out.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said a moment ago too about your wife having the steady job and benefits. And that's something that my wife has, a steady job and the benefits. And anytime I get a chance to say that, I put that out there. Always. Because those are the institutional or domestic structures that allow us to freelance and weather those ups and downs. And I just like, how important has that been for you to have that infrastructure in your life so you can turn it loose with the work you do? It's
been crucial. And in fact, I think I have a benefit because I met my wife back in journalism school 20 some years ago now. And she's kind of a recovered journalist. Like she decided to kind of go the communications route, which she's really good at. So she understands the schedule shift of freelancing. In fact, if anything, she gets me more now that I'm a freelancer than when I was before, because before it'd be the office hours plus the evening meeting or the reporting trip that I have to go to. Now I'm here. She also works from home. That works great. But yeah, when it comes to the benefits, and again, not to get political at all, but like that's the reality of this country. Like I have 2 kids. They need health benefits. I need health benefits. And without that, freelancing would make it prohibitive to do that. To have that structure, both like through the health benefits, but also through the understanding of a spouse that understands what I do, why I do it, and supports how I do it. I say that every time. Like there's just no way, not just financially, but because I joke that she supports her job is to support my journalism habit. But like, it's also the emotional support, the idea that, hey, right at the outset, she was like, you can do this. And I'm like, sure, if you say so. Just remember you said that when I'm when I'm on the couch playing Switch all day, waiting for my assignments to come in. But that hasn't been the reality yet. Knock on wood.
And I love how your wheelhouse was more like those kind of quirky features that are almost like nonfiction short stories or stuff like that. And how did you develop that taste in that kind of journalism and that kind of storytelling?
It's been ever since I transitioned because when I came up, I started in newspapers and was actually a business and health writer, which was hilarious because like at 23, when I had that job, I was fat and poor. So it was just like, I'll be the business and health editor of the Southeast Missourian kind of a daily regional back in the day. But as part of that, you're always writing these centerpiece things. And I've always had this kind of like widespread curiosity about just about everything. I can get interested in anything as long as my subject's passionate about it. And so that has really translated well to these kind of quirky things, like going out with these, zoologists to study Indiana brown bats, or to go up, with a stunt plane driver, a pilot, and go up with them and just really be open to the adventure of it. The shrimp trawlers, just like, hey, you want to do the story? Go, for 3 days on a shrimping boat. I'm like, sure, let's do that while my wife's, 8 months pregnant, which was a problem, but we got it done, and I got back in time. But yeah, so it's really, I've just had a widespread curiosity. I can be fascinated about anything as long as the subject is fascinated with it.
Yeah, the Last Trawlers piece, when I was reading it last night, it had such a pulse of an actual short story. Just the way it gets, it's not a tremendously long feature. You can tell the reporting is deep, but the writing is tight and economical. Like it really had that short story pulse to it, because there's not a lot of quotes, but what you do quote is very like powerful and moving. Like you're being very judicious about when they talk.
Yeah,
this is how I'm going to feature it. So it's like, how did you develop that muscle and that degree of authority with the material?
It was fascinating because it was just kind of the right thing at the right time in the right situation. Because and I think I say this in the kind of the postscript to that story, I talk about the photographer. Basically, it was a freelance photographer, Jamie Guy. He's now based in Minnesota. But he was just driving by, saw a bunch of trawlers when he lived in Georgia, stopped, talked to them. He did all the hard work. He got to know them. He actually went out on the boat with them just to take photographs. And then he came to Atlanta Magazine and was like, hey, here's this story. And me being the quirky guy that likes to, that's interested in things, I'm like, that's fascinating. Let's, because I grew up in like a rural area of central Missouri that was completely landlocked, but there's a certain kind of like farmer's mentality that translates perfectly to shrimping in any kind of agribusiness. And so basically he did all the hard work. He was there, knew the guys, was chatty with the guys. So basically I was just his friend. I was his +1 who was taking notes, which really immediately allowed me to kind of fade into the background because they were used to his presence. And so that's kind of rare to be able to do that, but it's also just the time spent. I was on that boat for like 2 or 3 days, spent the night there. And at that point they definitely forget you're there. Which is kind of sad because I'm not sure that I could devote that kind of time and energy to a story nowadays. I'm not sure, first of all, like a magazine would pay for the travel. I'm not sure I could afford to take those solid hours off away from Wi-Fi where I couldn't do any other work. And so it's kind of a sad reminder of kind of, I hope it's not a bygone era completely, because there are still people doing it, but fewer and fewer, which is kind of gone hand in hand with the transition to freelance.
Yeah, I feel like stories of that nature, and you're butting up against the realities of it. I almost feel like you have to almost treat those stories as if you're an actual fiction short story writer. Like, these are the things that I write them because I have to write them. I'll find how to do it in the nooks and crannies of my life because they mean that much. Because the money really isn't there anymore by and large. And yeah, to your point, like the time to take on a story like that, it almost has to be a passion project in the same way a fiction writer has to write short stories or something.
Absolutely. With that story too, and I've had several since then where the story is apparent before you get there, right? Like, and you always want to be open to like shifts and like forks in the road. But like when I got there, I was like, this is a dying industry. This is a young man who's like a multi-generation shrimper. That right there is the foundation of a story like that. And you don't want it to be trite and you don't want it to be stereotypical, but these are the pieces of a good business story and a good personal story. All I got to do is kind of build on top of it.
Part of this too, and a part of the CNF Pod Expanded Universe, I do this Substack called Pitch Club, where I invite journalists to share a pitch with me, and then I have them audio annotate it about how they landed it and just their thinking throughout the whole thing. So there's always this element of salesmanship in freelancing too. Originally conceived of it as just like looking at feature pitches, but then the more and more I've been doing it, I'm like, oh wow, like there's just so many elements of pitching that goes along with freelancing, like pitching subjects too, to like let you shadow them for a long time, especially like high profile people who don't necessarily, I don't know, they have access to their audience. Why would they let a journalist come along and go dictate the terms of a story?
I would never.
Right? Yeah, it's hard like these days. So what when you're looking to like say, just pitch a subject or something, how do you navigate just the pitching and the lobbying to let someone like yourself shadow them for a period of time?
It's tough, and it goes back, and especially in the freelance game, it goes back to, and there is no right way to do it, and there's no regular way to do it, but like it comes back to like the cart or the horse. Do you pitch an editor having already gotten this stuff? In which case, it's harder to pitch that subject, right? Because like now I'm going to them like, I'm a writer. You can look, you can Google me. You can see that I've been published. I can't promise this is going to run anywhere. And then when I do, I can't promise where it's going to run. Obviously, we can talk about it. So will you just let this journalist follow you around with no promise of anything happening out at the end of it, which I've had several times, and they've been game. Obviously, once you get that green light, if you can get an editor who kind of trusts you, and that's just building relationships, which is all this business is, both with editors and with publications and with sources. It's basically, hey, this is what you can do. This is the reach you're going to have. This is kind of what I see as a possible benefit. You are selling it. You don't want to make promises or anything like that. And you want to be very upfront, obviously, always with kind of what you're doing and what your role is, especially nowadays when that role is so gray and so blurry in so many different ways and so many different publications, to where that staunch line, that line between journalism and advertising is, I don't think it's ever been more blurry than it is now. So yeah, it's really just about being open with communication all around. I've found, like with editors, with sources, with everybody you're dealing with, just be completely transparent about what you're doing.
Yeah, it's these days too. Even going back to even though it was brilliant, like the Last Dance docuseries, when these very powerful central figures at the heart of it, have some degree of editorial say, you're not getting to the real story sometimes. Though Jordan was pretty forthcoming in that, but but the fact of the matter is he still had a bit of his thumb on the scale. Absolutely. Of it. And, in these days, so many prominent athletes have their own production companies and such robust social media following that it's like, you're never going to really get a good profile on, LeBron James unless you just eschew talking to him altogether and try to get to the orbit. Yeah. It's so as a result, like journalism and specifically sports journalism is just it's dying, and it's really, my God, it's just so hard to tell really good stories of the prominent athletes, but maybe at the mid to low levels, there's still great stories to be told.
I think so too, and that is another appeal of kind of doing those like mid-level and quirkier stories where like, yeah, they have something to say, and they're not going to have their people around them. They're not listening to what that in that echo chamber, and there isn't that. Yeah, they don't have the walls up against them for sure.
You're talking about this game is certainly about relationships, and for people who might be on the less experienced end of the spectrum of freelancing, what's key and integral to building that foundation of relationships so that you might be able to have more of a sustained go with this?
It's really hard. And I've spoken to classes before, journalism classes and students in the past. And I'm not sure, like most of them are like, hey, I want to get into the freelance gig right out of school. A lot of them probably don't have a choice that I had, but I don't know. I worked in, city regional magazines for 10 years. And I happened to go to journalism school with like Seth Wickersham and Justin Heckert, Steve Walente, guys who were in the industry. I lean on my Rolodex all the time to this day. Like I'm working on a feature now for Indianapolis Monthly. I haven't worked there since 2011, but I know the people there. They trust me, and I don't live there anymore, and they still trust me to get that story, to do that profile. And so, yeah, it's really hard without an established network. And I was very fortunate to kind of come up in city regional magazines when I did, when CRMA, the kind of the trade organization, was still pretty well intact. Places like Texas Monthly, Los Angeles Magazine, Philadelphia Magazine, where really big established writers worked. It was kind of an open network, and I would just, kind of reach out to Skip Hollingsworth in Texas or Pam Koloff and be like, hey, and it was a community to the point now where, those connections are still entrenched. And they know that I can do what I do, and I obviously know they continue to do what they do. It's really hard. And yeah, through like just friendships with like Tom Lake, who now writes for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, formerly of Sports Illustrated, and other writers like that, just like through that city regional connection and that network, I still lean on that every day. So I honestly, I don't know how you do it directly out of school, unless you happen to kind of come up in that cadre of equally talented, ambitious journalists who somewhere get a foothold somewhere. So it's tough. I honestly don't know where you'd start.
I know. And with the, when you see these mass layoffs happening most recently at the Washington Post, you're gutted for the institution and what it means for journalism. But then like as freelancers, you're like, oh, fuck.
Right, exactly.
The pool just got a whole lot deeper.
Yeah.
A whole lot fewer bylines.
No, absolutely. And it was a double whammy because I did a lot of freelance stuff for the Washington Post. And now I'm like, well, where did that budget go? Sometimes it can, I'm not going to say it's a good thing. It's never a good thing. But sometimes that frees up freelance budget. But most of the time, it just means everything's going away. And so it's like I lose a client and I have a bunch of competition at the same time. And it sucks for the institution. But first and foremost.
That afterword in the next wave thing. I love that you brought that, like, ideas are what separate successful writers from merely talented ones. So I'd love for you to just expand on, especially in the freelance world, just the having ideas, generating ideas, and executing on them.
I think, I want to say it was Jason Fagoni, formerly of Philadelphia Magazine, author, great writer, and also a guy who I just like, hey, I saw your name in Philly Mag and I work here, and a connection that way. He once told me a piece of advice that I think is right, is like, come to editors with solutions, not with problems. And I have a lot of young freelance writers be like, hey, hook me up with this editor and do this and do that. And I'm like, I can connect you, but you better have pitches. If you don't come with the idea, you're just a problem. And I think the way Fagoni worded it is like, you're just another name in the inbox. And they're flooded with email all day about people who need things. And if you're like, hey, I'm this writer, here are some clips, hope you have any ideas for me. And it's just like, that's a problem. That's not a solution. Yeah. Do your research, look at what the publication does, kind of find what they might need, and come to them with, to varying degrees in different places, require different lengths of depth. Like I remember Outside Magazine practically wanted you to write half the feature in the pitch. But like some places, and especially if you get those relationships, it can be like 2 sentences. Like, I'm pitching this and this works that way. But yeah, come to editors as a solution, not a problem, is always the thing that I lean on there.
Yeah. And that afterward also, you write like the danger of chasing a topic rather than a specific narrative, that can get you into trouble, which especially as a freelancer, it could be trouble. Like, you can't necessarily afford to go too deep down a particular road or rabbit hole. So just I'd love for you to expand on that as well, when you like, okay, this is an actual opportunity for me to pursue, or maybe I need to pull the ripcord.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you always kind of like to have to go into that looking to you have to kind of keep your blinders off to an extent to make sure you're open, that you don't miss a story that you weren't seeing coming. Pitching first always helps in that way too. And when I was on staff at the city regional magazines, I didn't have to pitch as hard because the editors kind of trusted me. And I think I've developed a reputation of being able to, like, we can send Tony to this event and he will find a story within that event, which is another thing you can do when you have a staff job. But yeah, when you're pitching like freelance editors in the freelance game, I mean, you want to nail it down as early as possible, as much as possible, because that's your pitch. Your pitch is you're trying to grab the editor like you would try to grab a reader. So you better have something interesting right at the top, and then show that you know what you're talking about, some level of expertise in the middle of it. And also leave yourself open, because a good editor will be like, hey, I know this was my pitch, but here's what I found, and I think this is a little bit better. It's kind of fluid that way. But yeah, in order to get anybody to say a green light, you're going to need something other than a topic. Like that'll be the first thing a freelance editor tells you is like, not a freelance, you know what I mean? As a freelancer, the editor will tell you that this is too vague, this is too nebulous, nail it down for me.
Yeah, when I talk to Sayward or Jonah from the Atavist, who I usually feature one of their writer every month, and I also talk to them, and they are a very specific kind of magazine. So when I talk to them about their pitches, the ones that tend to fail are the ones who are like, oh, this is kind of a cool idea, will you turn me loose on it? They're like, no, we need to know you have access to these central figures. Do you say you have access to the archives that you're purporting, and so forth? And it's like, in the pitch there can be no mystery.
Right.
In the story, yeah, sure, you can tease things out and narratively speaking, but in that pitch, like, you need to make sure you've got things locked down.
Absolutely. Well, and as a freelancer too, and I talk about this, and this is a big thing, and I don't want to take too much of a tangent, but it really trained me to treat what I do as a business and as a kind of a vocation, as opposed to like the art form. Like, it was kind of a luxury being on staff somewhere and being like, I can be artistic. I can take a draft and try to tell the story backwards and do this and do these crazy creative things, where the editor just can be like, no, this isn't working, do it over. When you're freelance, you can't afford a rewrite. You can't afford to kind of go crazy on this kind of tangent. And it's made me become more conservative and treat kind of what I'm doing as a business and as a craft, I guess, as opposed. There's still artistry to it. I don't want to say it's like, it's not like making widgets, as they say. It has made me take a much more practical approach, both to the craft of writing and how time management and how I commoditize my time. And it just makes you think of things in a different light. And I think that residually has been a benefit when it comes to editors, because they're in their position as well. They want to do something great and creative and important, but they have a budget, they have time constraints. So if you can bring that business approach to it, I found that's really kind of what has separated my business from a lot of others.
Yeah, how did you cultivate that business muscle for freelancing? It's really hard for a lot of people because they just want to focus on like the creative spot. But in order to do this successfully for as long as you've done it, you really need to cultivate that business muscle for sure.
It's the truth. Yeah, no, it's basically, and I've got a bit of like, my dad owned his own business. I kind of grew up in that, so I have a mind for it, I think. But it's really just treating an editor like a client, not some artist you want to impress. Your editor is somebody who, if you understand, if you've ever done the job, because I was a senior editor for a little while, got close enough to the big editor to kind of see the workload, see everything they're doing. And it's just like, man, if you can deliver solid copy on time that fills their need, you are, you're at the bottom of their list of problems and priorities. And that's going to make them come back to you every time. It's just simple service. It's basically like if you were doing anything else. And I look at it like, being a carpenter or being a contractor or any kind of electrician, a plumber even. It's like, they'll understand you need to be flexible in order to do your job if you're willing to make it up to them. And if, again, I've had editors tell me this, it's like, we know, like, if I'm asking for an extra week for something, it's because they know it's not because I'm being lazy, it's because I'm trying to juggle all these other projects. And they know that when they get it a week later, it's going to be clean, it's going to be concise, it's going to be what they want.
Yeah. Do you handle everything yourself or subcontract anything else to other people?
I have an accountant, and that,
okay. Yeah,
I love her. But other than that, yeah, it's just me. And I'm my own IT person, which fortunately I'd worked in IT a little bit in college, which means nothing because that was like the late 90s, early 2000s. And that's like working with rocks. But like, you know what I mean? Like, but other than that, like, yeah, everything's on your own. That's the other thing they definitely don't teach you is like how to budget. Like I talk to freelancers, like they don't know what cash flow is. I'm like, that you have to have money to spend, especially when you're chasing invoices. And that's the other thing. Like some days are just spent chasing invoices, right? Like it's like the business end of it. So I think I have a mind that's kind of geared to that. But yeah, that's the dirty work, right?
Absolutely. And how many projects would you say on average do you have going at a given time to keep the flywheel going?
Right now, I got my list. I actually started making a list. It also forced me to get organized because I am not an organized person.
Same.
Right. So it's forced me to. So my list, I've got 9, 10, 11. I've got 12 projects kind of in various stages right now for 6 different clients.
Yeah. So how do you then, being someone who's not particularly organized, how do you keep that organized so things don't fall by the wayside and things stay on track and so forth?
I'm going to name drop like crazy here. Mike Sager, when I first got into this, told me, he basically sent me his template for an Excel database, which basically says, column A, client, column B, project, column C, date assigned, column D, word count, column E, the fee, column F, the date it's due, column G, the date you actually turn it in, and then column H, the date you send the invoice, the number of the invoice, and the amount of the invoice, and then the date you get paid. And so that's how I do that. And basically, I've also picked up from a managing editor at Atlanta magazine, my color coding, which is basically if the row is green, I've sent the invoice. If the row is yellow, it's due. If the row is red, it's overdue. And if it's white, it's been done and I've been paid. Yeah, it's basically just kind of jumping in there.
I love color coding.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's just that you can just look at a glance, be like, oh my God. In your case, like, oh, tons of white. Awesome. I've been paid. Oh, there's like 10 rows of red. Like, this can't happen.
No,
like,
it's so bad. And the worst, and I've had to train myself. This is a weird little thing, but like, I used to, as soon as I get the assignment, I'd put it in the database, and then you put your little fee there. This is what I'm going to make. And then of course it falls through or disappears. And there's nothing more painful than taking it out of the database. It's like you're going backwards, even though you haven't done the work on it and all this stuff. So it's like, it's been hard to train myself in that way too.
Yeah. And what's been your experience with, kilt stories?
Fortunately, I've had a few the very generous editors that either have a kill fee, and obviously that's the other thing is contracts, which strangely, I fewer and fewer people seem to be doing that because I haven't really gotten a contract in a while. But when I first started out, everybody was doing contracts, which would address your kill fee, would address all that kind of stuff. So fortunately, I've always been able to kind of talk that out with the editor. And very fortunately, I'm going to jinx myself by even saying this. In 12 years, I've only had one client that welched completely, that went out of business and didn't pay me, which is remarkable. And I know I've jinked myself there because I actually have an invoice that's just a $500 invoice that I'm going to need to track down because I know that the company went out. So yeah, I might've jinxed myself there, but yeah, I've been very fortunate. And again, it's communications, it's relationships and things like that.
And people who write, long form features and do it really well. And when I'm reading them, I'm always amazed at the material and the quotes they get. I'm like, they always seem to get just the best friggin' quotes. I'm like, how do they do this? And I think I have an idea, but it would just for you having been at this so long and you have such a robust network of writers who routinely crush this kind of stuff. So like when you're coming across those things, like how are these really great reporters and writers just getting this material so their stories are just electric when you read them?
Mm-hmm. It's all different. And we talk about this all the time too. It's because there are some that are like just drilled down, like great interviewers that could be on TV doing it. They're together. They know when to jump off on a tangent when the answer does. It's very formal. It's something that's just a beautiful interview to watch. And then there are people like me who stutter and stammer and cannot do that, but somehow it's almost like the source feels sorry for me and they're just going to give me something better to say. But it's amazing to me, and it's always been amazing to me how, and I'm not particularly socially awkward. I'm more of a people person, but there are so many shy people and reserved people and people who do not adapt well to social situations who can just interject themselves into, with a famous person or somebody who's not famous and just get them to open up and kind of get it that way. I've seen it happen every which way. Like people that are just really great, will drill down, with the quotes and, Edward R. Murrow the hell out of this thing. And then the other people that are just kind of are more like Columbo. Are just like, yeah, and this, it's kind of crazy that way.
Yeah. How would you characterize your particular style of interviewing?
I'm much more Columbo than Edward R. Murrow, but it's also true. And somebody was on this the other day. It's like, don't say talk about this. Have a specific question. I'm not sure I agree with that. Like, it depends on the setting. That was in a press conference setting, which I hate those because I feel obligated. I feel obligated to my fellow journalists to give them more time when the aggressive person gets the good stuff there. But like, if it's one-on-one or like in a set situation, yeah, it's just talking to people. Like, I don't know. It's just like, and it's amazing when people find out that you're interested in what they're interested in. That's all it takes. One thing, and an interesting thing too, that we haven't talked about yet is when I started off, I was very much like always a generalist. And we talked about that. Like, being a generalist keeps you open to all these other things. Specializing kind of puts you in this niche, in this kind of pigeonhole. I've still tried to generalize, but I've found also that I've gotten into beer writing lately. That's kind of become my niche over the last 3 or 4 years. Just kind of turning a habit into a hobby, into a profession. And basically, like, that's the other thing is like you get a basic knowledge of some things where you just know enough to like make it sound like you know what you're talking about, but not enough that they think you know everything. And you're kind of in that sweet spot where they want to tell you things. They want to show you, prove out this theory that you have and talk to you that way. So it's really just kind of coming to the level of your source material, I think.
In the Last Trawler thing too, and what you were talking about bycatch, but that was bycatch in terms of what they're trawling for, and shrimp and all that stuff. But I think in reporting too, like especially if you're a recorder user, which I use, most people do. Old school people sometimes don't, but there is this idea of like I'd rather have like all that bycatch to throw out and then and not miss anything. And how do you guard against that? Maybe the notebook versus the recorder in your reporting.
It's a weird thing. And it's really again by the situation, because not only do I have a recorder, and now with like transcription software, there's really no reason not to use a recorder. Like it's just nice to have it, and you can always just turn it out. Before, I might not use it if I knew I wasn't going to have time to transcribe it anyway.
Yeah.
But now there's just no reason not to. So I record everything, but I also use the notebook. But also, and Skip Hollandsworth talked about this again, just name dropping. He just bring the laptop, and like I've done that several times too. And it's amazing how quickly the laptop disappears. Like I'll just type directly into the thing, and it's super convenient, and it's surprisingly unobtrusive to the interview. Obviously, you can't just be walking around, like that. And then of course, again with phones and stuff. And again, this is dating myself because I actually remember a time before the phones. I mean, video, right? Like, why wouldn't I take video of some of this crap? Like, this is awesome. I mean, not for my Instagram or to put it out on social media, but like just because if I want to put myself back in that spot when I'm writing about it, here's the panoramic video of what I was seeing. I wish I would have had that on that shrimping boat. I mean, holy cow, you could have like just really recreated the setting. But I just had a little Nokia candy bar that barely gave me the score to the Cardinals Brewers game. So,
if your job as the reporter is to gather as much information as possible, and then if you're doing these long form things, appealing to the senses is how you can really immerse a reader in it. And so, like, why wouldn't you get as much sensory detail as possible and whatever tools at your disposal are there?
Absolutely. The other thing too, you mentioned the bycatch, and I've told other writers this too, because I've found this to be absolutely the case, is that like, and I call it like using every part of the buffalo. Like I've taken stuff, especially like in the beer writing, but also I've taken stuff that has been bycatched to this story and been like, I've gone to other publications. I'm like, I just did this story about this, this brewer in Oklahoma who is doing this cool stuff with, Native American traditions of his tribe. But there's also a story about his dad that didn't fit into that Bloomberg story. It was a Salvation South. Chuck Reese runs it. I was like, there's a great father-son story here. If you could just stretch the definition of South to Oklahoma, which some people do, some people don't, I could write the story for you. I've already done the reporting. I could just call him back and do some other stuff. And there's an easy story fee for a story that I really wanted to tell that I couldn't tell over here. So you mentioned the bycatch. It can become valuable too if you can reuse it.
For sure. And I love this this idea of like you got into beer writing too, and I'm like in a beer mecca of the country too. It's changed a lot in the last few years, a lot of corporate buyout and everything, but there's still a lot of really good local beer establishments in breweries. But what's been illuminating about covering that?
Well, it's hilarious. I make this joke. It's because I actually started off as a musician in college. That's what I wanted to do. Took a couple little kind of a walkabout year doing that. Got into journalism, And now I'm into beer writing. And I'm like, I just have a knack for choosing industries that are going to suffer because no sooner did I get into the beer industry writing that it's all kind of coming down. I want to think that the industry it's kind of a course correction, because it was getting a little bit ridiculous with how many places would have, like 5 breweries on 2 blocks and everything. I love it, but I could kind of see where that may not have been a sustainable business model. But what's been great about it is, and what I found about it is, and it's a perfect example of what we were talking about earlier. I love beer. I always have. I love the culture about it. And that's kind of the niche too. But I don't ever want to make it. And no one ever wants to drink what I make, including myself, especially myself. And I don't, and the process is still mysterious to me. So it's like I walk into a brewery and like, I know the history of this and I know the cultural place for this. I don't know what you do. Tell me what you do, how you do it. And it's that perfect kind of wheelhouse of kind of knowing just enough and not too much. And the other thing is too, when we talk about running freelance as a business, I've also kind of found my niche there in that I'm also in it's the North American Beer Writers Guild. And it's funny because everybody else in there are industry insiders. Like these are writers that are great writers who absolutely know the ins and outs of every part of the business or they know every part of brewing. And I've almost kind of found my niche as the guy who doesn't know those things. Like I'm the guy who has these connections with these general interest publications, who knows how to write about beer for people who don't know anything about beer, and kind of hopefully transmit my passion. I do like a monthly column for Bloomberg called Top Shelf, where that's exactly it. Like I'm just trying to demystify this or talk about, talk about the emergence. What is a sour? What is, what are fooders? What is Bierstahlen? Like that kind of thing. And it's been a blast. So it's interesting how you kind of follow your passion and try to create a niche for yourself.
And how has your relationship to ambition changed and the goals and success that you've set out for yourself that maybe have maybe from 12 years ago to where they are now? What's been that development and evolution like for you?
That's a great question. And it's fascinating because I think about it a lot. I run every day, and I've kind of taken to like not listening to podcasts and music now and just running kind of out in the silence of things in my own mind. And I think about this a lot. Not to get too philosophical, but yeah, no, it's kind of fascinating that like when I first started magazine writing, it was like, the mid 2000s, 2005. And that was the era of like, you want to be the Esquire writer, right? You want to be Tom Junot. You want to be, Tom Chiarella. You want to be Chris Jones. You want to go get those contracts and be able to live anywhere you want and be able to kind of go and travel and see these things and write these big, beautiful magazine stories. And then of course, that job I don't know too many people that have that job anymore, including some of those guys. Like they've kind of gone off and done their own things. The nature of magazines has changed. The nature of journalism has obviously changed, and definitely the economics of it is. So I've found myself, and obviously also kind of being a very pragmatic person who, has a family, who's I'm not dicking around here, right? Like I've got to provide, I've got to prove to my wife every day that it's worth her time and support to do this, because she's upstairs and she's my boss. So basically,
total CFO.
Yeah,
it's like got to report to the CFO.
Absolutely, and there's no getting away from it because she sees all the receipts and all the bills. So it's like there's no hiding it. There's no hiding that expense report. But yeah, no, so even through that pragmatic approach, I found myself exactly where I wanted to be. Maybe not, I'm not vying for national magazine awards, and I'm not writing for Esquire, although sometimes those projects kind of come up. But I'm able to live where I want. I'm able to write about what I want, the way I want, on my terms. And so it's crazy how I've kind of backed into exactly what I always wanted.
Because so much of it is operating a business with words, and you've got like, dozen projects in the air. Like, how do you like to structure your days? So, basically you're chipping away at multiple things at multiple times.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's kind of just prioritizing things. I try to first of all, I try to keep to the original deadline of everything. And sometimes it's basically, to answer your question, it's a completely unstructured day. It kind of depends on the workload.
Yeah.
Like if I've got something that I didn't get done last night, I get up at 4 a.m. to start working on it this morning, to kind of flip it around that way. Sometimes it's kind of prioritizing and remembering, well, I put these guys off last time, so I really need to get this on their deadline, maybe even earlier if I can, and kind of just get the trains in order, as I say, right? But basically it starts with coffee, lots of coffee. And then basically it's kind of whatever I rarely find myself I actually try to make this time for myself, a time to like just go out on the deck if the weather's nice, or just kind of like go out for a long run and kind of like, here's the stories I want to tell. Here's what I should reach out. Here are some ideas that I want to write down and pitch. Fortunately, and I'm in this time now where the assignments are coming so fast that I don't have time to pitch. And so you just kind of try to kind of go with the flow with it, and always kind of be on call, like we talked about earlier, always be available and diligent about it, but also kind of take time to breathe and kind of take time to, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but like it's very unstructured. My day is either, sometimes it's just, wall to wall writing. Sometimes I don't write a word. It's just emailing. Sometimes it's, tracking down invoices. Sometimes it's seeking out other clients. Sometimes it's like, I need to follow up with this editor about this pitch. I'm going to give up on this editor, take that pitch, rework it, and send it to this person. Because I'm also a person, I have friends in the business who are like, will like broadcast, like go to the Last Trawler, just send out the nets, right? A pitch at the same time. I can't do that and it's never happened. But what if, two people say yes? How can I walk that back? So as a result, I'm sitting on pitches that I wrote, a year ago that I'm slowly trying to get to a home. And so so basically, to answer your question, there is no structure, which is actually, I love it. It's just a new adventure every day.
Yeah. I remember when I was reporting on the Front Runner and research, like, it was a lot of newspapers.com stuff. And then since I have a weird phone number, I guess we all kind of have weird phone numbers now.
Totally.
Yeah. And so like, I might take a chunk of time and end up leaving 10 voicemails. And then it's like, okay, let's get back into this other thing, but you never know who's going to call back and when. So you have to be nimble in that regard, and not as much as it would be nice to have like a truly like 90-minute deep block of like concentration. You never know if that phone is going to start buzzing back with people calling you back. So you really have to, you have to be nimble in that regard.
Absolutely. No, I always have it on. And it's funny because it's people talk about ringtones. Like I'm a reporter. I haven't had a ringtone for 25 years. Like my phone's always on silent but I'm always on it, right? Like even when I'm running, I run with my phone. If it buzzes, I'm checking the email, and I'll stop and type something out. If I have to, I'll stop and call somebody if it's that urgent. Like I'm always on. And it doesn't bother me because I'm also like always off, like sometimes I can let that go to voicemail. Sometimes I can wait till I get back to do that. But yeah, it's just kind of being open with it. But it is kind of fascinating, just the day-to-day of it and kind of how things are different.
Inherent in this is rejection also, especially if you're just starting. Even experienced people, deal with it. They just know how to deal with it better. So how have you developed that, the musculature and the scar tissue around rejection?
It still sucks. Absolutely. That doesn't get easier. And especially like, because you get to a point where, and it's just like with writing too, like when you think you know what you're doing, you find out that you don't. Like, this pitch is perfect for this publication. Why wouldn't they say yes to this? And no, it's not for us. I'm like, seriously? Like, this is perfect for you. And so like, yeah, it sucks. And God, I actually think about this too. And I have a folder for the wayward pitches that I'm just like, I'm not sure I can sell this anymore. Either that event's passed, that fad's passed. It was great when I had the time to do it, when the time was to do it. And so you just got to be orphaned, and maybe it'll come back around again. Maybe it'll be another chance. And I've had sources. It's just like, I'm sorry guys. Like I really thought this would sell. This either got killed, this got dumped. I was working on it while the publication folded. I mean, that's the reality nowadays. It's like, I've had that several times where it's just like, well, I've done the work and they pay me for it, but it's not going to run anywhere. And then you got to find another home and you figure, I have this completed thing. This is going to be so easy to sell, even if I could take a cut rate on it. No, it just sits there and languishes. And so you just kind of keep moving on. I think there's a thing. And the other thing is, after 12 years of it, it's this knowledge that like, you kind of, I hate to even say it out loud. I hate to speak it into existence, but you kind of like, it's going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like, I've been through layoffs. I've been through staff cuts. I've been through wage cuts. I've been through all this shit. And somehow I'm still doing it. We're entering the era of AI when it's coming for my job. And it's just like, okay, we'll see. And maybe that's the case. And, nothing ever happens until it happens. But after 25 years in the industry, it's just like, we'll see what happens. We'll wait this out.
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty, and how you're speaking to it right now, but how have you and how do you weather that uncertainty of things changing underfoot, but still doing the work?
I found that what I can rely on, and it's really interesting too, because we were kind of talking about the idea of retirement. I just turned 47 full disclosure, and that's probably going to screw me with some editors. But like, so I may frantically call you back and be, please bleep that part out. But it is weird because I make this joke all the time. So many of my clients I wouldn't recognize if I bumped into them on the street. Like I make these connections through other people. I'm a name in the inbox. I know this person. I don't dox them or go stalk them on social media. Sometimes if I'm interviewing somebody, I might go to their LinkedIn page just to kind of like see what they look like if they have a picture posted or something. But it's fascinating that like they don't know how old I am. They don't know, so the age isn't part of it is what I'm saying. It hasn't come into play yet. With that in mind, but to answer your question, I found that my niche and what I bring to the table is the fact that I've been doing it so long, that I have an old school approach to it that's malleable and very open to like doing these new things. Like, hey, Tony, can you shoot video? Like, of course I can shoot video. And then I go talk to my 14-year-old daughter. I'm like, how do I shoot this video? Those kind of things, like just things that I am a dinosaur, and I'm old school even for my age. Like I was kind of a throwback even when I was young. And so you just kind of always say yes, like we talked about earlier, and then learn it on the fly and kind of bring that old school mentality with an openness to, using technology and being malleable about it.
Yeah. And if you had to identify something that, that you identify as particularly good at, your superpower, what would you say that is?
That's really fascinating. My superpower. I think I'm a realist. I think that's it. I know some really tremendous artists. I know people who work harder than me. I know people who have better ideas than I do. I take the blinders off. Like at the end of the day, I know that what I'm doing, it can be done artfully and it can be done in a way that's emotionally impactful. But I think I'm one of the few writers, and I may not say this, who understands that I'm doing a job, that I'm doing a service. And I don't want to, there's a lot of people but at the end of the day, I want it to be good. I want it to be something that other writers like, and I want it to be something that I'm proud of. But I also want it to be something that's doing the job to which it's being set forth. And freelancing, you see that all the time. It depends on the publication you're writing for. I want to be geared to this audience. I want to give the editor what they're trying to do. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to communicate ideas. Like this beautiful thing, I'm not a poet. Like this beautiful thing that doesn't serve its purpose is not what I want to do. I want to be the guy who builds a beautiful cabinet that will last you 100 years and, be sent down. Like that's what I want to do. I want to be the guy that puts together the thing that's going to be practical in your daily use, that you also can take pride in the craftsmanship of it.
Yeah. And is there, or what balance of the work you do is pure journalistic versus maybe other mercenary type stuff?
It depends, and it fluctuates there. And then there's also what's really cool, and I found a great niche is alumni magazines, which is kind of in between, right? Like I've never had any journalistic restriction. They let me do my journalism job there, even though it's basically a publication it's kind of that weird little gray area.
Yeah.
But I'd say it's about 50-50. You have to sometimes take the mercenary jobs, the content writing, as it were. I used to like run away from that word like the plague, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
We're providing content. That's a kind of part of the realism part too, and remembering that kind of stuff and custom publications and things like that. I take my share of that. I'm not ashamed to admit it. And it funds the journalism part. And that's the other thing too, is like you kind of realize as you get older, like this story's not going to pay what it's worth, but it's going to be a lot of fun to do. So I'm going to do that, and so I can take a couple other jobs that I may not want to do to fund that and pay it forward. And that's the other thing that I've really learned too from the business end is really the spend money to make money. And that's what I find a lot of journalists, freelancers have trouble doing. They have trouble being like, the other day, like I got wind that there was a story, possibility down in Tulsa. And I'm like, this is not really on my beat. And Tulsa's about 6.5 hour drive for me. And so it wasn't really on my beat, but I'm like, well, as a beer writer, I know there are breweries there. I can go out of pocket and pay for my trip down there and pay for a hotel room, hit some breweries, which, are going to be researched for this other thing that I do, meet with these guys and have a better formulated pitch. But that's all on me. Like I just put, however many miles on my car, how many, gallons of gas in my tank, spent the hotel room to make that happen, and in hopes that it pays off in the long run. So yeah, it's a wild ride.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I'd love to get so you've talked about running and how important that is to you. It's such a great meditative exercise, especially for, what we do. And a lot of the writing sometimes happens when we're running, idea generation and
Absolutely.
stuff. So just how integral is it to your day-to-day life, but also your creative life?
It's super integral, and it's amazing, and it kind of fluctuates too on how I spend the time. The actual running part, I hate. I hate the physical thing of running, but it has to be. And actually, I was kind of thinking about this too as I was running the other day, because like I said earlier, a lot of the times I'll just have it off where I'm just kind of thinking to myself, there's no audio. Sometimes I'll plug in an audiobook that I know I like, just get the rhythm of language. Sometimes I'll listen to an interview, right? Like, I need to untangle this. I don't have an hour to sit at my desk and listen to this, but I have an hour to go out and run and listen to this. Running is fascinating because walking is not the same, right? And I think it dates back to I'm going to get kind of wonky here, but like, I think it dates back to our days as hunter-gatherers. Like, when you're walking, you're calm, you're at peace, but you're also open to your surroundings and you're very easily distracted. When you were a hunter-gatherer, when you're running, you were either running from something or trying to find something. Either way, you're focused, right? Like, so your mind is laser focused on whatever you're thinking about. And it just provides that weird kind of window into untangling things. And I actually think literally kind of shaking things physically loose out of your brain almost. That probably doesn't match up, biologically, but like, yeah, sometimes you're just like, I'm stuck here. I'm going to go for a run. And by the time you're back, you've shaken loose the answer.
Yeah, I like to run with, I usually have a pencil in my hat and a Write in the Rain notebook in my pocket too. So anytime I'll scribble something like, oh, that's a cool little turn of phrase. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm going to put it down and we'll save it for later.
Yes. I'll record some notes too. Like, this should start with this. And like, so yeah, it's ridiculous. And I need to erase those before somebody finds them.
Nice. Well, Tony, I want to be mindful of your time. And as I bring these conversations down for a landing, I always love asking the guests for just a fun recommendation for the listeners. And that's just like anything you find cool that you want to share with the listeners. It's like bringing you a little bit of joy. It could be, a brand of coffee, a fanny pack, a cool brand of socks. It doesn't matter. Dealer's choice. So up to you.
Oh, God. I found alarmingly too many people don't use their local library. And use your local library. Not only just for books, but like Canopy, Hoopla, you can get audiobooks that way. That's been my salvation. It's just like kind of going to the library does that kind of fit into what you're talking about?
Sure, absolutely. And and also just tap your librarian on the shoulder too.
Yes.
Like, they're so underutilized as a resource for writers because they're just there. They're these wealth of knowledge, and they're such great tour guides to the place. And you ask them for a favor and they'll just return that tenfold because they're just like these little research mice, and they just go everywhere and they'll like pull things for you. Like, holy shit, this is
they were the original Google, right?
Yeah,
I used to work. I used to work in the library, and I always have nothing but respect for the things that you can do there, and so and they won't be there much longer if we don't use them. So please.
100%. Well, Tony, this was amazing to just get an entree into your thinking about your ongoing freelance career, and this is really cool and illuminating stuff. So thank you so much for carving out the time.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. I really appreciate it.
Just awesome. Thanks to Tony for coming on the show, and thanks to Seth Wickersham for putting us in touch. Name drop. It's always nice talking to working freelance writers who often do unglamorous work to subsidize the stuff they're more proud of, and talking openly about it. That was revelatory for me a few years ago as this podcast was gaining a bit of altitude, talking to, I think it was probably a Louisa Thomas who said something of bringing up the writing we don't tweet about. Writers can be very good at giving the impression that they're making a living writing a few features a year. But oftentimes, as many of you have come to know, and maybe some of you are just learning, that there's often this mercenary work on the side that is really subsidizing the work that you see people really celebrate online. And unless some of these writers that are writing very few features a year, or just like a handful, unless they're on staff, rare as that is, most writers are lying by omission. Thanks again to Lindsay Street, Shauna Kenny, and Wyatt Massey for joining the Patreon crew. If you want to join them and legions of others, you can go to patreon.com/CNFpod. And also thanks to the Power of Narrative Conference for its promotional support. Visit combeyond.bu.edu and use that Narrative 20 code to get a sick discount. And no, I don't get commissions or kickbacks. Follow the show on Instagram at Creative Nonfiction Podcast. And sign up for Pitch Club and Rage Against the Algorithm, 2 newsletters over at brendanmeyer.com for embed forms. I might move Pitch Club off Substack because of the whole Nazi affiliation thing. I don't know. I'm definitely against Nazis. Jesus Christ. Let's get that out there. I invited someone to Pitch Club, and she cited the Nazi thing as a reason why she didn't want to come on and be celebrated on Pitch Club. Whatever. I honored her decision. I don't think she actually likes me very much, for one, so I think that's the primary reason. Whatever. Whatever, man. But I mean, the fucking Nazis are on every platform. So are you not going to use YouTube, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook? Anyway, we'll probably never speak again, and I'm sure she's just fine with that. Such is life. Anyway, in case you were wondering why there was no parting shot last week, it's because I killed it. I had it tracked and packaged, but I thought better about it. It wasn't that it was whiny or that I was particularly slighted by someone I consider a friend. Not that they listen to the show, and if they did, not that they listen to the end. Only about 4 of you do. It was something that made me feel really shitty, and it was pretty insulting what this other person did, and I just didn't want to give it any more air. The more enlightened among us will probably say, like, who cares, BO? Take the high road. And then there's me. I still elected to kill it, which I guess is neither high nor low, but maybe middle. So I just get to stew on it. Even though it was how I felt, and it was deeply personal to me, and a trend I often see from people who come on this podcast. Anyway, which is to say, I'm drawing up a different kind of parting shot today as I listen to rain sounds on my phone. In Oregon, you would think I hear rain sounds enough. No, I can never hear enough rain sounds. I got to thinking about this disease of having to feel productive at every turn, especially so for the freelancer type who might not have the same kind of metrics that you get from a traditional employment situation, or even the more physical jobs like landscaping or stocking produce. You can see the results of your labor. And then you see goons like RFK Jr. lament that people with autism, well, they won't have the joy of paying taxes. Or Dr. fucking Oz saying people should get right into the workforce so they can start paying income taxes right away. Let's keep dumbing down our society even more so we can make the rich ever richer. Good stuff. Good times, right? I understand we have to be productive on some level so we can have housing and food and clothes and a library flush with hardcover novels. But productivity porn, hustle porn, the 4-hour work week porn of it all, it's so toxic because, like everything in a capitalistic culture, of more, you're never enough. You're never doing enough until you die. You'll never be productive enough. Enough is the operative word to try to live by. Hard as fuck, but it's what we try to do here. Which made me think that I'd rather see progress over productivity. We're not factories. The best of us are trying to create something we can be proud of, and that's not necessarily prone to productivity. But progress can be incremental. One drop of water in the bucket, one measly plunk of water is still progress to filling up the damn thing. Sometimes I bristle at the writing influencer types online who say you have to write every day, and if you don't, you're somehow not taking your writing seriously, or to be serious, you need to do it every day. But sometimes I feel that does a great disservice to people. Like, life kind of sucks right now, and life kind of always sucks to some extent on a continuum. And if you're not scrambling to protect a neighbor from the American Gestapo, or tired of your 3rd consecutive week of protesting, or tired from working your 3 jobs just so you have enough to eat, I'm not going to begrudge you for not finding time to write today, this week, or even this month. I'm not going to be the one who says you're not serious about it because you just have no energy to give. And if you do have a blissful 10 minutes to yourself, you may elect to write, or you just might close your eyes and cry or sleep. Maybe you can jot down ideas for when the season feels ripe to perhaps take on a creative project. And maybe that more productivity mindset helps you get shit done. It helps for sure, especially with some of the stuff I do where I need to make steady progress toward a deadline. But in softer times, I'd rather feel like I'm nudging toward a goal. It's kind of the same way for, I don't know, say fat loss. You know, if you have 20 pounds of fat to lose and you feel like you need to lose it for health reasons, no fat shaming here. It's because maybe you're heading towards a blood pressure induced stroke. I had a 165/103, not to brag, the other day. In my defense, I was super hungover. It's probably best to lose those 20 pounds over a 2-year span, making very slow but steady progress that doesn't necessarily feel productive in the moment. I beat the shit out of myself for not being productive enough, for not making enough money, for not cleaning the house enough. And, our weekends are often meant for, like, quote unquote, getting shit done, as my wife likes to say. If you take a break, you tend to feel guilty. I hate that for us. I hate that for you. I hate that for all of us. Rewiring that circuitry is going to take time. Steady progress, I guess. So stay wild, CNFers. And if you can't do interviews, see ya.